Hello and welcome to the Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. Each week, the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in finance take you beyond the numbers and hype, right to the heart of the big issues of the day. This week, we have the latest in an ongoing series of special editions for you, as we meet another of the inspirational thought leaders and innovators that UBS supports and celebrates through its Global Visionaries programme. This time, it's the turn of Raphael Güller, co-founder and chief product officer of Sweep, a carbon management and reduction software company that makes it easy for corporate and financial organisations to measure, reduce and report their carbon emissions. Raphael, who counts a successful stint at Monocle's sister creative agency Wink amongst his previous experiences, called in at Monocle's HQ in Zürich to explain more about his work and objectives with Sweep. Raphael was also there to reflect on his involvement in the most recent UBS Pitch for Purpose event, where a group of global visionaries pitch their vision for positive social and environmental impact to an audience made up of UBS clients interested in impact topics, investors and startup ecosystem builders. Joining Raphael in the Monocle Radio studios, and always a welcome returning guest on this programme, was Tom Hall, Global Head of Social Impact at UBS. My colleague Chris Chermak was asking the questions, and Chris began by asking global visionary Raphael to introduce himself.
I'm Raphael Güller. I'm one of the three co-founders of Sweep. We are your sustainability data management platform, so we help businesses track, disclose and act on their sustainability data.
And tell us more about that, or particularly, first of all, perhaps, what drew you to the issue that you are tackling in sustainability?
I think we're working on the biggest issue that humanity has ever faced, so it's easy to get excited about that. As a founding team, we have experience in building business intelligence tools. Right? So we've previously built a startup that was acquired by Zendesk, the Silicon Valley tech company. That's their analytics engine today still. And so we know how to work with large amounts of business data. And so we were looking at how we can apply those skills to the climate crisis. And I think we quickly figured out that this is both a data and a network problem, right? And data because there's various sort of vast types of data that you need to track across your organization. That might be obviously your energy consumption, that might be your transports, but that's also your commuting data, that's your suppliers, carbon emissions, it's your employees commuting, right? So a really broad range. If you think ESG, that's even more, that might be your HR data, etc. And the real tricky piece is that you need to track this across your networks, right? Across your value chain. So it's not just sort of within the constraints of your business, it's across businesses. And so we are building tooling that helps you make those connections and collaboratively work on decarbonizing.
And tell us a little more about, I guess, what makes your approach unique. As you do say there, this is the problem of our time. It's something businesses are trying to figure out. What are you offering them that is not out there at the moment?
Yeah, so I think it's this network piece. We have hundreds of customers on the platform today. That includes the likes of L'Oréal or Burberry, SSE, the British energy company. Here in Switzerland, we have Swisscom or SBB. We also have Banque de France, for example, right, the French National Bank. So a really broad range of types of businesses. And so we're mapping their value chains. And so we're tracking the emissions of 160,000 suppliers across those networks now. And I think at this point, that means we're managing around 330 megatons of tons of CO2 equivalent. Sorry, that's a nerdy term, but essentially your greenhouse gas emissions. And that's 95% of France's carbon emissions, right? And that figure has doubled in the last 6 months. So we're really trying to track those networks and see where we can really drive reductions at scale.
It really is an incredible figure when you put it that way. I mean, how much then of this for you is, well, I guess you're working with individual companies, but it is about that overall outcome, isn't it, at the same time?
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing to see now how we start to have these overlaps, right? We have one company that's already on Sweep and then a new one joins us and they're like, oh, wow, these suppliers of ours are already on your platform, right? So really mapping those networks is really amazing. And we often call it sort of a carbon map, right? Understanding where the real reduction potentials lie across those networks.
Raphael, just talk to me about sort of the challenges that you've faced as well a little bit, or what was the problem here that you feel like you solved that was a sticking point in this issue of trying to track carbon emissions?
I mean, it's just removing friction, right? I mean, for starters, businesses are getting better at managing their data, but it's still really hard. And now again, that data is spread everywhere. So just making this more efficient and quicker. There's more and more regulations coming in as well. You might have heard of the CSRD. It's sort of part of the EU Green New Deal, where they're mandating large companies to disclose their ESG data every year. So that comes with a lot of extra work, right, that is required from companies that are already stretched. And so just being able to help make all this as efficient as possible is massive, of course. So that's sort of the first bit. I mean, I think in terms of challenges to overcome, I think ultimately I think our biggest challenge is to change the narrative. Right? I think businesses think this used to be a marketing thing, and now it's sort of maybe a non-compliance thing that's done on the side. It's just a climate problem. We really think this is a business problem. Right. We strongly believe that we've reached a tipping point where decarbonization is going to happen. This is in many ways like digitalization, where every single business is going to get impacted. And we believe that the businesses today that realize that and start changing their business models are going to be the winners of tomorrow. Right? And so we've just published a study with Capgemini, and we've interviewed business leaders in France, the UK, the US, and Germany, and 80% of them said that they think they will need to radically transform their businesses to survive in a low-carbon economy. And so, I think reframing the problem as a business opportunity as well, right, and allowing you to set essentially now the foundation for your future success. I think that's where we've got a lot of work to do.
It's really interesting when you describe it that way, Raphael, kind of changing from this idea of something that is compliance to something that is an opportunity for business. What kind of success have you had with that by using your approach when you approach businesses?
Yeah, I think there's so many aspects to this, right? One is, of course, you understanding how your business works, right? I think we're really good with financial KPIs, but all these ESG KPIs are just other ways to understand your business and how it's run and how to make it more efficient, right? And so we, for example, we work with a really big French retailer that has a lot of subsidiaries spread across Europe, and they're using CSRD, that regulation again, and sweep also as a sort of really transformational moment to change how they track information across those businesses and how they, every region is sort of doing their own thing and none of it matches, right? So they're using this as getting all sorts of other KPIs up and running that they can track globally. So I think that's one element, but then there's so much more, right? It's like it's engaging your staff with something they really care about. It's building new and better relationships with your partners, with your suppliers, with reinvestment, right? And that can help you build better business. So I think there's many examples to get into.
Well, Tom, let me bring you in on here because obviously the impact of this, when you hear Raphael talking, is relatively clear in terms of the challenge of sustainability and carbon emissions and helping companies tackle that. But what is it about? Why is this important for UBS to kind of champion these sorts of individuals who are driving these innovative solutions to the challenges of our time?
Well, I think first and foremost it's important because it's important for the world. We know we've got to transition to a low-carbon economy. We know that there's lots of underinvested in issues from global access to education and healthcare, which, again, I think building on what Raphael says, if we address, there's a huge opportunity. There's economic upside. If you meet the Sustainable Development Goals, it's estimated it will add about 12 trillion to the global economy. So for us, this isn't just about doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. It's about doing the right thing because it's actually profitable for everyone. And our clients also care deeply about trying to address some of these big social and environmental problems that the world's facing. In fact, about 95% say they want to use their resources, whether that starts with their philanthropy or their investing or indeed their operating company, to try and address some of these pressing social and environmental problems that the world's facing. And we see, as part of our role being the world's largest global wealth manager, to connect our clients with ideas like Raphael's and the many others. I think we have 85 different global visionaries. We have about 350 partners in the Optimus Foundation who are all what I like to call impact unicorns or impact unicorns in the making. So, social enterprises or businesses that have the opportunity not just to be hopefully profitable businesses, but actually have impact in the billions. And we're already seeing some of the impact that Raphael is having in terms of CO2 emission reduction, and the truth is, we have to scale things like that. We have to find ideas that are genuinely scalable, that can really give people the data so that they can ultimately be profitable, be scalable, and address issues in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, we're striving to be a carbon emission unicorn, right? We're at 330 megatons, but we're striving to hit 1 billion soon.
There you go.
So that's
there
not
you
a metric,
go.
right?
Yeah, exactly. No, but that's the ambition, and this is what we love, right? for too long, I think when people think about trying to address social and environmental issues, we've done pilots, we've done small scale things with philanthropic capital, which are great for the individuals they help or for the ecosystems that they might improve. But unless that happens at massive scale, it ultimately doesn't really add up into solving a problem. So that's why at UBS we are a little bit obsessed with scalability and finding these kinds of pathways that can work. And sometimes that's in Raphael's case that's a B2B play. So you've got revenue from companies who need that data and they're going to be willing to pay for it because they can see in their own business models that that's going to generate cost savings or even new opportunities that they haven't foreseen. And like ESG as a concept has kind of shown that in trends and correlations. And I think actually really narrowing down onto specifics, and that's what I think something like what Raphael does in terms of really providing that transparency of data is really critical and can help those pathways. But that's not the only pathway to scale. I mean, some of the other visionaries we work with are B2G plays. They're working directly with government, and government spends $32 trillion a year on things like health and education and all sorts of other goods and services. And I think a lot of people would probably agree that not all public money is necessarily spent on the right things, on the most evidence-based things that have the most impact. And we've done a lot of work through both Optimus and in our kind of wider impact investing at UBS to partner with governments to get them to actually spend money on things that are data-driven. And just at the end of last year, we I think raised almost $100 million that's investing in outcomes contracts, pay for results mechanisms in emerging markets where you've got both UK or US government alongside the Ghanaian government and the Sierra Leonean government paying for the outcome of a child being educated and learning what they should learn. You do that at scale for 4 million kids across the country over a 10-year period, GDP will rise, right? This is kind of fairly simple stuff. So I think for us, it all boils down ultimately to data transparency. If you can prove the impact that's actually being driven, impact has value, and I think that's what Raphael's showing. You reduce carbon, that's got value. People are going to be willing to pay for it. That's why we have a voluntary carbon market that's 200 billion in scale. But we think there's a whole variety of other areas where impact can have value. In fact, I was talking to somebody last night, another potential global visionary, about water tokens. We know water is going to become an issue, increasingly is becoming an issue. Water usage for companies as another example. And I was in Australia earlier this year, and the Australian government are looking at reef tokens to reintroduce kind of the biodiversity of reefs, because that has such a huge, both important biodiversity factor, but also for tourism, right? So there's all these things that have value that we've not quite worked out how to value, but if you can start to show progress, you can start to show how you're making improvements, then people can start to pay for it. And that's why we like to talk about this concept of an impact economy, which is ultimately if you can show the value for the impact that's being driven by various different businesses or social enterprises or indeed charities, and you can actually create a transfer of value for that from governments or from companies or from consumers, then actually things that are both impactful can become some of the most profitable companies out there, which I think is really, really quite exciting. And at the same time, we've been mentioning things like CSRD and the regulatory side. There's also a negative externality for companies that don't do that. The regulations are often somewhat slower than some people would like, but they are coming, right? And actually the companies that are on the right side of that and are leaning into these kinds of strategies, we think are the ones that will be the more sustainable businesses in the most holistic meaning of that term in the longer term future.
It's really interesting the way you describe that, Tom, in terms of value and social value. And Raphael, I wanted to bring you in again on that as well. I mean, tell me about, for you, this Global Visionaries program. How has that impacted your own vision for the future? Where do you see kind of the biggest opportunities now to continue growing?
Yeah, I think for starters, it's great that UBS recognizes that investing in the future means investing in the businesses that will shape that future, right? And I think when I say investing, that's not just financially, that is just as much in exposure and giving us a platform, right? And when you start a company, we're 4.5 years in now. We started just when the pandemic started in our homes. We were 3 people, and you need to be put on the map, right? That just comes back to branding and cutting through the noise, and just all these platforms that we can get to get our word out there to, build the brand that is Sweep is invaluable, right? And that's programs like the UBS Global Visionaries. That's the people we surround ourselves with, right? That's the right investors. That is people like Tony Fadell, for example, the inventor of the iPod, that is a supporter of ours, and just all these ways that we can get the word out there and tell our story is crucial.
Tell us more about kind of how it helps, I guess, to be part of this program to really get yourself noticed. How have you found that?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's event is a great example, right? We did Pitch for Purpose, and so we had a lot of UBS customers and staff in the room. Everybody was tuning in through UBS TV as well online, and we got a platform to pitch what we were doing for 5 minutes. And yeah, so I think that was wonderful, and it's super nice as well to do this next to other startups that are trying to drive change as well. And yeah, so having this moment where we can pitch what we do is really great.
Well, and Tom, to bring you in on that point, I mean, beyond simply recognizing global visionaries and their status, how do you feel that these partnerships you have with social entrepreneurs like Raphael, how does it help scale ventures like Sweep?
Well, I think what's clear to us is that the issue isn't actually demand for impact, or even capital. There's the best part of $129 trillion in the wealth management industry alone. We've seen survey after survey showing that almost 80 trillion of that is controlled or will be controlled, particularly by next gen and women who are saying that they want to use their capital to drive impact alongside risk-adjusted return. So the capital's there, right? So then what's the rub? Why aren't we seeing more impact enterprises? And that's because ultimately being an entrepreneur is really hard. I think being an impact entrepreneur is even harder, and therefore these kinds of visionary impact unicorns need extra support, actually, and kind of deserve it, because they're trying to do two things, which is build a profitable business and one that's driving impact at the same time, even if that impact is going to be part of how they're profitable. So for us, this is just about connecting people not just with capital but with that skill set. I mean, UBS is fortunate enough to have over 1 million high net worth individual clients, a huge percentage of which are entrepreneurs themselves. So their skill set, know-how and support of an upcoming impact entrepreneur can be completely transformative, and I think that's part of the excitement, and our clients really enjoy that as well. They enjoy making those connections. We had another one of the Global Visionaries pitching yesterday, who was doing a kind of water-based charity and social enterprise, and it was immediate to me that there was about 5 people I needed to connect it with, and actually just even the connections can be very powerful. It's not just about capital. And then I think for us as a business and a firm, we've got over 100,000 employees who have skill sets in a whole variety of different areas that would be extremely expensive for a startup business to try and buy in. They're not necessarily going to get access to that. And if we can provide mentoring and that kind of skill-based volunteering to some of these businesses in their early stages, again, we think that can hopefully really add value. So I think that whole holistic nature of the UBS ecosystem can hopefully help accelerate these visionaries to the next stage in a much faster time than they'll be able to do on their own.
Raphael, Tom talked a lot there about and you did as well, this importance of making the connections, the networking. Scaling is often one of the most difficult steps for a company like yours, although when you provide the numbers that you did, you've already reached a certain amount of scale, absolutely. But what kind of strategies are you using at the moment to ensure that your growth remains sustainable and impactful, for that matter?
Yeah, I think to Tom's point, right, I think being able to show your impact is so key. And so in our case, we're a B Corp. We're also an entreprise à mission, right? We're a French company, and so that's quite a novel French legal structure. It's not an NGO, it's a for-profit company, but it comes with impact KPIs that we are being audited on every single year. KPMG is doing that for us. And so the numbers I'm giving you, we're not just being audited on our financials, also on our impact. And I think that's really important to tell our story. That's also important to keep us accountable, right, as we scale. I think in some ways we're lucky, right, because we're building B2B software, and I think the investment community is quite used to that, right? There's a very clear playbook, and there's sort of, everybody knows how you can scale this. And so it's maybe a little bit easier for us in that sense as well, but I know that a lot of other climate startups are sort of, more in R&D investment-heavy spaces where they need a lot of upfront capital. That can be much harder. And so I think, investors have a role to play, right? We have, for example, Marie Eklund from 2050 is one of our investors, and she runs an evergreen fund, right? That comes with less pressures to sort of, get the money out of the investments again. So I think that's really amazing. She's really inspiring. And then governments have a strong role to play, right? I think we can see in the US how that the big sort of governmental investments in clean energy are really paying off, and you know, I think we need much more of that in Europe as well. And the CSRD is another example, right? So the European Green New Deal, that regulation that's going to make companies disclose their actions, right? It's not just their data, it's also their targets and their investments and their progress. And so I think anything that gives it sort of a framework to operate within and that creates predictability is really, really key for us.
And Raphael, to follow up on that, I mean, as your journey continues here, when you talk about the investors you have and some of the government incentives you're looking for, what are your main priorities, I suppose, at this point for the social impact you want to create? What kind of leader do you want to be in this field going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we live what we preach, right? So obviously we account for our own carbon footprint. We call it dog fooding, right? We use our own tool. And so in many ways, we want to show the world that you can build a massive, successful business that also does massively good, right? So be a bit of a blueprint for all our customers as well. We call it forever companies, right? The businesses that understand that, you know, they need to change to survive in a decarbonized economy, and that there's a lot of potential attached to that. And so, yeah, I think we want to be a poster child forever company, and there's some way to go, but I think we're well on our way.
Tom Hall, and before that, Raphael Güller talking to Monocle's Chris Cermak in Zurich earlier. And that brings us to the end of this special edition of The Bulletin with UBS here on Monocle Radio. For more about all the Global Visionaries in the UBS programme, just head to ubs.com and search Global Visionaries. And you can find out more about the inspirational work of Raphael and his colleagues at Sweep by heading to sweep.net. In the meantime, you can listen again to this and every episode, including our archive of other brilliant visionaries, such as the winner of this year's Pitch for Purpose event, at monocle.com or wherever you get your podcasts. This is The Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks for listening.